Storm Tracker Podcast.
All right, it's the Storm Tracker Podcast. Marcus Benjamin and Frank Tucker here, and we're going into Miami versus Duke. And Miami is looking to continue to win. They got their first ACC win last week against Virginia Tech. Now they are home to Duke. So we will have our predictions on CanesCounty.com on how exactly we think this game will go. But I wanted to talk about just kind of the ramifications of a loss in case it does happen, and also a win. So in case the Hurricanes do lose this game, like where do the Canes go after a loss?
I mean, it's going to be tough to kind of predict it just because you've already lost to Mid-Tennessee State, which is quite possibly the worst loss we've had since FIU. But we've also got to win against a team that was tough to beat last week against Virginia Tech, right? I think people are going to look at Virginia Tech like they're a bad squad, but that was our first ACC win. So I think that kind of extends the honeymoon phase for Mario Cristobal a little bit, getting back to 500 in the ACC and in season play. I think a loss would hurt. If it was a close loss, I don't think it would kill recruiting. I think it would just kind of be part of the expectation of where we're at in the season if they did lose. I don't think that there's like crazy expectations for the Hurricanes right now. They are sitting at 3-3. A win for me would be positive, though, because you're continuing to push towards a potential ACC championship appearance. I don't know if that's the expectation right now, but if you keep winning, you're still in the race because the Coastal is so wide open. But I don't think it's that big or small of a factor. I think it's just kind of blah, I guess you could say, if they win or lose.
Yeah, I think they need to win. They do need to win against a team like Duke just for aesthetic purposes. When people think of Duke, they're always going to think of same old Duke. No one's going to think about Duke and think that they are anywhere close to being an elite team or a powerhouse. For the aesthetics for Miami Hurricanes fans, Miami has to come out there and win. Usually back in the 90s and 80s, Miami would just go out there and dominate, just like Keen said, against a team like Duke. But that's not the case, and that hasn't been the case. Although Miami's still dominating the series here. I think it's 15-4 that the series is at right now. But Miami has struggled against Coastal teams, and they have to win this Coastal game to have a shot at the Coastal, which is still in the realm of possibility. I know most people will probably roll their eyes when they hear that, but winning the Coastal is definitely still in the realm of possibility. North Carolina is obviously going to be your biggest hurdle here. It would have helped if Duke would have held on to win that game last week against North Carolina. That would have definitely helped Miami's chances to possibly get into that ACC championship game. But, it is what it is, and they have to kind of take it game by game, try to win the week and go 1-0, as Coach Cristobal and some of the players have been saying. And I think if they win this game, it's going to be another boost of confidence for Tyler Van Dyke and the defense and the coaching staff. And I think if they win, they will feel like they can possibly win the Coastal, because the toughest opponent obviously left on the schedule is going to be Clemson. At this point, I'm guessing that's probably going to be a loss, especially going into a hostile environment in Death Valley. But the rest of the games are definitely winnable. And if North Carolina can lose a couple of games, which is what you're going to need, you're going to need 2 losses from North Carolina to have a shot at the Coastal. then this team is going to gain confidence game by game. And I think a game against Virginia is a game that they can definitely win. Of course, they're going to be excited to play Florida State at home and avenge the loss from last year. And then after that, they have to get through a road game at Georgia Tech and then win at home against Pitt to really have a shot. So each game is huge now, and like you said, I do believe it doesn't really move the needle much as far as recruiting is concerned, whether they win or lose. But a loss to me here would be devastating to the psyche of the team, and I think if they lose this game, I think this season could tumble out of control here. So you want to see the Hurricanes go out there and perform, and you want it to not end like how North Carolina did, or the North Carolina game did, or how that dreadful Middle Tennessee State game did.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that it's unfortunate that this season is like always at a potential opportunity to kind of tumble out of control. But that's just kind of where we're at when you're in a transition phase. You got still a pretty much a roster full of Manny Diaz players and a Mario Cristobal staff. So just going to have some patience, I guess, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm looking at the standings now here. Miami currently sitting at 4th in the Coastal standings. They're one game back in the loss column, like I said, from North Carolina. So it's definitely winnable, and if you can somehow win the Coastal, which I do think that is the ceiling for Miami at this point. We're going to be on Carolina watch for these next few weeks. And Carolina has a pretty decent schedule coming up. I mean, they do play Wake Forest, who's a good team. I think they're actually the second best team in the conference. And then you got NC State at as far as the last game of the season for them, which is definitely going to be a tough game, rivalry game. So those are definitely potential losses for Carolina, but you're probably going to need one more loss from Carolina to even have a shot. So they do play Pittsburgh next Saturday. They're actually off this week. So they've got Pittsburgh next Saturday, then they've got Virginia, and then they've got Georgia Tech. On November 19th. So one of those 3 games they would have to lose, and they would have to ultimately lose against Wake and NC State. So Coastal is still there, but you're asking for a lot at this point, because right now North Carolina is in the driver's seat.
Yeah, and it's going to be like that for most of the year, just because that Clemson game is just kind of hang over the team's head in a lot of different ways. But I think being in competition for a chance at a ACC championship appearance is going to be a building block piece for Cristobal going forward. I don't think in the first year, based on what they've said in press conferences and what they've said behind closed doors, that the expectation was ever to win an ACC championship in the first year. So staying in competition, I think, is going to be important moving forward.
Yeah. Who do you think is going to be the MVP of this game? Miami and Duke.
I think it's going to be Colby Young, man. I think it's going to be Colby Young. I think your guy is a potential superstar. And I got to give you credit, man.
Thank you.
You and I went back and forth all offseason and all fall camp about Romello Brinson or Colby Young, and you definitely won out. My guy has had 2 catches for like 0 yards last week, and your guy had like 9 catches for 110 and a touchdown. So I got to keep writing about him, and I cannot write about my guy. So I think this is going to be another week where he shines against subpar competition on the outside. I think Van Dyke is trusting him a lot right now. I know that Ladson's getting a lot of targets underneath, but that vertical threat over the top is something that we've seen him really utilize, especially the Charleston Rambos of the world and the first couple of games of Xavier Restrepo. So I see another huge game from Colby Young. I also see another huge game potentially from Akeem Mesidor. I think he's going to need to be a big-time player in this game against this really good offensive line for Miami to be able to subdue that running game in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on your MVPs, and thank you for the props on Colby Young. But I guess what's more disappointing is Romello Brinson. The fact that he's not really getting out there and really showing what he can do is unfortunate. I'm going to throw out one more or two more potential MVPs for this game. One, I think, has to be your guy, Corey Flagg. Corey Flagg is a guy that is going to have to step up in this game because Riley Leonard is a big, strong runner, and he's capable of throwing the ball as well. But more importantly, when he gets outside of the pocket, we're going to need somebody to run this guy down. And Corey Flagg, him being arguably the best linebacker on the team, needs to step up in this game. And also, I'm going to say Cam Kinchens is gonna have to help with run support as well. He's got to be disciplined enough to stay in coverage, but at the same time, he has to step up and run support as well to run up and make some tackles if Riley Leonard starts to get loose here. But with me just saying that, I'm starting to think here about. I mean, this is 2022, Frank, and now we got to start talking about transfers or players that could be potentially transferring out. Now, I'm not saying that when I talk about these certain players possibly transferring out, and it's really just based on their tenure and also their lack of playing time. Okay, so it's not anything that is set in stone. I do want to kind of preface that that this is just really kind of based on what we've been seeing so far and just with their tenure on the team. So I'm going to throw out a couple of names that I think could possibly be transferring out from Miami. And this is, like I said, just based on lack of playing time and just based on their time here at Miami. For one, I'm going to say Avante Williams is somebody that you may have to consider maybe thinking about. You would think would think about transferring just based on his lack of playing time. This was a player that was rated like a 5-star guy coming out of high school. He was, drawing comparisons to some of the Miami all-time greats, yet he has not lived up to the billing thus far. Last week, he was the lowest graded defender at around 30, like a 30 grade. So Avante Williams is a player that I wouldn't be surprised jumped into the transfer portal. Another player that comes to mind for me is Khalil Brantley and also Dominic Mammarelli as well. Now, I say that only because you got 3 tight ends potentially coming in here that will compete for playing time with the recruiting class. And you have Jaleel Skinner, who is a true freshman who jumped over Khalil Brantley and Mammarelli. So Jaleel Skinner is out there getting playing time while Khalil Brantley and Amorelli are not. And then the last one takes me to your guy, man, Romello Brunson. This is another highly recruited guy coming out of high school, and he is not getting significant playing time. You would think this would be his opportunity with Jacoby George out and Xavier Restrepo out. Those guys are going to be coming back soon. Brashard Smith has shown that he can, play at a high level, as well as Frank Ladson, as well as Colby Young. Melo Brinson is starting to seem like the odd man out here when it comes to the receiving core. So those are some names that I think, that I wouldn't be surprised would be in the transfer portal by the end of the season.
Yeah, I'm going to throw another name out there, and that's Big Baby Seymour. He's been out with injury, but he's just not the type of player that Mario Cristobal recruits on the offensive line. We know how good he can be from his time at Miami Central, but any offensive line that's 6', 6'1", probably doesn't fit in the Mario Cristobal scheme, as we're seeing him recruit some mammoth-type prospects in the 2023 class. And I think with bringing in potentially 6 offensive linemen in the 2023 class, you're going to see some guys start to maybe move out. And I know you're going to have some guys graduate on the line, but still, I think you're going to see some overall change, and probably for the best, as Mario Cristobal kind of sets the tone with the trenches. Another guy I could see possibly transferring out is, I hate to say it, Romello Brinson. Yeah, you're 100% right about it. I think he has the talent to be an asset in this offense, but with Colby Young doing what he's doing, there's not going to be that opportunity going forward. Even next year, you're going to see, a lot of those young receivers start to emerge. And you got another year of Frank Ladson too. I don't see him going to the league after this season. So, right. Yeah, Romello probably ends up a Power 5 transfer to somebody else. I would hate to see him go in conference, because if the right coaching staff gets that skill set on the right track, he could be a player that we're seeing at the next level and talking about how did it not work at Miami. So those are a couple homegrown kids that I think probably end up making moves after the season.
I'm going to throw out 2 more names. Just want to get your opinion. And so those names are Thad Franklin and Jake Garcia.
I think Jake Garcia stays. I think Van Dyke, if he continues this going forward, I think he still ends up going to the NFL draft. And I think Garcia is going to get his opportunity to be the guy starting next season. I think, listen, this is going to be a little bit of a warm take right here. I think Ja'Cory Brown makes this a competition next season. I like what Ja'Cory Brown brings to the table. I think he's shown more as a passer than people give him credit for. And I think he is a dynamic athlete, but I do think Jake Garcia stays. And who was the other name that you mentioned?
Thad Franklin.
I think he stays too. He's got a role as that big back. Could he be that Gus Edwards type player to transfer to, another smaller Power 5 program and do well like Gus did with Rutgers? Yeah, I could see that maybe, but I think Don Chaney's more likely to transfer than him. I think Don Chaney really hasn't lived up to the billing as a guy who was considered a top 5 running back at one time in the 2020 class. He's injuries have kind of killed his career here at Miami. And Robert Burns was another South Florida guy who had really high standing early on in recruiting rankings and kind of fell off a little bit, came to Miami and never really got healthy. He could be the next Robert Burns, who ends up having to transfer out to actually getting an opportunity to play. I think Burns is actually doing okay somewhere else right now too.
Yeah, I think a lot will be revealed once Don Chaney comes back, and he's due to come back in maybe about a month, and we'll see how kind of the rotation goes at that point. And I think whoever gets the most carries after he returns is likely to stay, and then maybe the other player, tries his hand at the transfer portal. But I actually think both of them actually stay at least for one more year. Um, but yeah, so those are some names to kind of just keep in mind when it comes to transferring. Like I said, once again, I do want to say that it's not anything that we're hearing personally from these players or sources. This is just from what we see and what could potentially be. So, also wanted to talk about recruiting a little bit. Cormani McClain has decided on an announcement date, and this is a player that Miami has been trying to land for a good while now. They've been in contact with Cormani throughout his process, but it looks like from what we're hearing, he is not going to be committing to Miami. Looks like the Gators and the Tide are ahead of Miami in this race, and it seems like they're falling behind on a couple other guys as well, or maybe just haven't pursued the recruitment of certain players. Samuel and Pemba, seems like Georgia and Tennessee are ahead of Miami in that race. And also Damon Wilson, they seems like they have kind of fallen behind there. Uh, Ruben Bain, it's still kind of a toss up at this point. Not exactly sure where Miami exactly falls. They're in the race, but it seems like it's kind of 1A, 1B with Bama and Miami, and then maybe Auburn is also pushing very hard as well. What's your take right now on some of those top guys?
Yeah, Cormani, no chance unless some other circumstances arise for Miami to get in there. I think he's locked into Florida pretty much. I think they just made it happen. They there was some alumni got involved and have been mentors for him in this process. And the Pouncey brothers who have been instrumental in his relationship with his mom. And honestly, I think we do need to talk about Coach Addae and his recruiting strategies with defensive backs. We still just have Robert Stafford committed in the 2023 class. Antoine Jackson is not officially in the 2023 class yet. So you got to kind of look at what's going on with the recruiting at that position, because there's opportunity to play almost right away for some of these top guys. Like Damari Brown is already physically ready to play comparative to what we have in the program right now. Cormani McClain is a guy that could come to Miami and start day one. So it's disappointing to see, prospects like that not really have Miami as that top option late in the process. Damon Wilson, I don't think Miami was ever really in it. I think he ends up going to Ohio State. I think he just kind of wanted to win signing day and go to the top place where he's going to be developed for the next level. Ruben Bain is an intriguing conversation because Auburn has really pushed themselves into this conversation. And Alabama still in the race. Miami obviously still in the race. When you got family ties the way he does to Miami, with his brother being a GA and Roland Smith, currently in the program, they're always going to have a chance. I think it comes down to the wire. I think it really depends on who Auburn hires as their head coach. If you see a splash hire like a Deion Sanders or something like that, watch out. I think like an Edwin Joseph could even consider an Auburn. I think a Stanquan Clark. Yeah, I think Stanquan Clark could consider an Auburn.
Really?
That's something to change a lot of different things for Miami's recruiting, depending on what Auburn does at their head coaching position. So that's something to watch there. I personally think Alabama's kind of stepped out in the top two right there. I think it's Miami and Auburn right now. And if Auburn botches that or keeps their head coach, then I think Bama steps back in ahead of Auburn. But I think Miami's pretty entrenched as a top two option for Ruben Bain.
Yeah, I'm not that privy to Auburn's chances, but I do still believe that Alabama does have a solid chance to land. I think they always have a puncher's chance, right? I mean,
Yeah.
It's Nick Saban, it's Bama. The way he talked about Bama with you the last time you spoke to him, Frank, the resume speaks for yourself with Bama, and the relationships and proximity obviously speaks for itself with Miami. So I still think Alabama is in it, and based on what you said, it sounds like Auburn is definitely in it. So this is maybe a 1A, 1B, 1C battle for Ruben Bain that will go down to the very end. But back to what you were saying about defensive backs, though. I mean, I kind of agree with you there about where Miami is, and it seems like they're falling behind a little bit in that area. Damari Brown, I assume his top three right now is Alabama, Florida State, and Miami. So what I think if Damari was really solid on Miami, he would have committed to Miami already. I think that would have happened already. So my guess is that there's something about Miami that he's not quite sure about. Like he's not totally sold about, let's just say, because they're pushing for Damari really hard. And, obviously there's ties with, his dad or whatnot. So there's something there that makes me say I'm not sure if that's even going to happen. But Miami is also pursuing, from what I hear through a source, Caleb Spencer, the Oklahoma commit, is definitely on the Hurricanes' radar. He is a player that visited for the North Carolina game, and from what I hear, they are trying to push for an official visit. So he is an athlete that has played running back, but has played safety. So they are recruiting him as a safety, and that's potentially could be the first safety on the board for Miami if they could potentially flip him from Oklahoma. Oklahoma, you could say, is having a worse season than Miami. Is that they're definitely not living up to expectations of Oklahoma this season. So that any prospect that is committed to Oklahoma, I think it could be a potential flip. And you could probably say that about LSU as well, as they are not living up to their normal expectations as well. So watch out for Caleb Spencer. He is definitely a name to watch. And also an interesting name that kind of showed up on the visitors list. And you can see our visitors list on CanesCounty.com for this Duke game is Sharif Denson, the South Florida Express defensive back. He committed to Florida right now. He is going to be visiting Miami this weekend. So interesting to see that name pop up on our list here. So that's another player to watch potentially, especially if they are looking to add other players to that Gators class, like a Cormani McLean. So we'll continue to monitor that, but those are a couple of names to kind of watch there. Your thoughts on Sharif Denson, though?
Yeah, I think the Ohio State thing is interesting right now. Something that I've kind of heard was Carnell Tate is still looking at Tennessee. And from everything I'm hearing, if Carnell Tate flips to Tennessee, you could see some of those SFE kids become free game once again. I think them going as like a collective group is something that those kids liked, but it seems like they're venturing into other avenues. We know Mark Fletcher has heavily been in contact with the Miami Hurricanes since committing to Ohio State. I think the biggest domino to fall would be Carnell Tate to potentially flipping to Tennessee, especially with the way their season is going and having Nico currently committed in the class. If that happens, watch for Brandon Ennis, Mark Fletcher, maybe a Sharif Denson as potential flip candidates for Miami going forward.
Wow, that'd be pretty big. That'd be pretty big. And we obviously saw what Tennessee did on the field last week against Alabama. It was pretty impressive. I think they got somewhat lucky, though. If Alabama kicks that field goal, we wouldn't even be talking about Tennessee, but they're actually in the top 5. Highest I've seen them ranked in a very long time. Probably this century is probably the highest I've ever seen them ranked since, T. Martin and Peyton Manning days and Philip Fulmer at head coach. Back to also Jamal Lewis. Those are the kind of names that I think of when I think of great Tennessee teams. And this guy Jaden Hooker is a guy who is potentially bringing the Vols back along with their head coach Josh Heupel. So interesting. It will be interesting to see how their class kind of turns out at the end of the season, of course, as well as Miami's. Miami's got they'll have a lot of work to do here. There's still a lot of work to be done to kind of finish off this class, but Mario Cristobal's staffs usually close pretty well when it comes to recruiting. So a lot yet to be revealed with the class. But that's all I got here for the Storm Tracker podcast. Anything else you wanted to cover today, Frank?
Nah, looking forward to a win this weekend against Duke, man.
All right. So let's go Canes. Let's see if they can pull this one out against the Blue Devils.